Thank you so much, Paul. And I think Chris is just going to bring some slides up. So I'm going to reflect a bit on the questions that Paul outlined there. So I'll introduce myself first. We'll have a bit of a think about that question of what is research, but really importantly, what's the role of the voluntary and community sector within research, particularly around health and social care research. So just to introduce myself, I'm Mel Hughes, Professor of Social Work at Bournemouth University, and I'm academic lead for the PEER partnership, and PEER is public involvement in education and research. So I work very closely with Kate and Kathy, who are on the call today, and with a number of community partners, including Lantern, Health Bus and CAN, who've been very involved in the project that we're going to reflect on as a case study today in thinking about the role of the voluntary and community sector in research. I sit within the Research Centre for Seldom Heard Voices, so we're interested in thinking about how our research, how we can apply our research to real world challenges. It's about actually doing research that's going to make a difference to society, have a real impact. And we do that by engaging with marginalised communities to make sure that we're really amplifying excluded and silent voices. So we can really make sure that our research is more relevant. We do lots of things in the PEER partnership, just in terms of giving you a bit of context. So we support our BU researchers about how they can really harness lived experience expertise in their research and develop approaches for involving the public. We conduct research ourselves to grow the evidence about what really good, impactful public involvement looks like. So we co-design very inclusive research approaches with different communities. We deliver lots of kind of training, coaching, mentoring to help researchers develop more inclusive research. In a typical year, we involve hundreds of individuals. And last year, in the last academic year, we collaborated with 40 different external community organisations in research and education at BU. So that first question that we focus today's webinar on is what is research? And I think sometimes we can overthink this a bit, can't we? But in its broadest sense, the definition of research is about generating and contributing new knowledge. It's about adding new knowledge or new insights, new perspectives to what we already know or what we thought we knew. If we look at the word literally, research, it means to search and search again. So it's about something that's in depth, about unpicking, about exploring. It's about kind of generating and contributing new knowledge that will actually make a difference. Again, if we're thinking about what research it involves, we do research for different reasons, don't we? So a huge area of research is around just trying to understand things better. So seeking deeper understanding and insights. It might be about gathering and studying information. So that's searching and searching again. It might be testing ideas or new approaches or interventions. So different ways of working or different treatment options, different interventions, and seeing what works best. It's also about verifying available knowledge, pulling together lots of data from different sources to try and draw conclusions to add to that knowledge base. There are lots of different types of research. If we think specifically about methods or tools that we use most commonly in health and social care research, there are clinical trials, there might be case study analysis, we might use focus groups, interviews, questionnaires, surveys, we might conduct impact evaluations to know what impact a way of working or a treatment has had, data analysis. Increasingly, we're using a lot more community-based participatory action research. We do a lot of that in PEER. So bringing people with very different experiences and types of expertise together to explore an issue, a phenomenon, a topic together, again, to draw on those different types of expertise. When we think of research and when we think of involving the public and involving communities in research, we need to be thinking about the whole research cycle. There's quite a lot of work that goes on to think of ideas or to get feedback on the design of studies, but really meaningful involvement where we can harness lived experience expertise from particular communities and individuals involves involvement right through these 7 stages. So just very briefly, stage 1 in a research cycle is, what are we going to research? What's the issue? What's the problem? What's the phenomenon that we want to explore? What is it that we need to know? and identifying those priorities. And sometimes they're set nationally, or they're set by a funder, or they're set by an organisation, but they can also be set by communities and community organisations as well. What are the urgent needs, the pressing needs that we need to research and we need to understand better, and that we need to develop a clear knowledge of? Stage 2 is then being able to get kind of funding to be able to undertake that work, commissioning who's going to be involved in doing it. Stage 3 is the design, the planning. So what kind of methods, tools are we going to use? What does that look like? And that's designing that hopefully through co-design. Stage 4 is then doing it, so undertaking the research and analysing the findings from it. And really important to have different perspectives, including communities and people with lived experience in that analysis of the findings, that sense making. Stage 5 is then sharing the findings, getting that knowledge out there to the people that need it and can act on it. Stage 6 and 7 are then putting that into practice and then evaluating it to see what difference that makes. And then the idea is you go right back to kind of stage 1 and go through that stage again. That's okay, Chris, you can move on. There's a challenge though, and there are a number of challenges in how we conduct particularly health and social care research, but this is a key challenge that we wanted to share with you today. So we know that meaningful public and community involvement in research improves the relevance of the research, its quality, and the impact it will go on to have. There's tons of evidence over years showing that that's the case. The difficulty, the challenge, is there's a real lack of diversity of who is involved in shaping and conducting and participating in research. So we want to just share this quote with you from NHS England. The areas where there are the lowest levels of research participation also align closely to areas where incomes are lowest and indices of deprivation are highest. This means that research is often conducted with individuals who are healthier and wealthier and lacks representation from our diverse society. So this is where you come in, because that's a problem. It means we're really good at conducting research, developing interventions, treatments for white, middle class, well-educated people, and we're missing out on lots of people that are in the kind of where incomes are lowest, where indices of deprivation are highest. And our view is that voluntary and community sector are best placed to help kind of improve the diversity of who's involved in research. So when we think about what your role could be in the voluntary and community sector, and I know that you'll have lots of ideas of why you want to be involved, how you want to be involved, we know that we need to collaborate with communities in research at every stage of that research cycle if we're going to address health and social inequalities, if we're going to increase that diversity of who's involved in designing research, conducting research, and being participants in research. But this involves developing much more inclusive approaches and flexible ways of working if we're to involve the people that are currently excluded and not typically participating in research. And our view is that you are best placed to drive this change. We've been doing quite a lot of work around this. So you'll see here, back in 2022, NHS England and the Department for Health and Social Care funded all 42 integrated care systems in England to grow our local research engagement networks by working with local VCSs to engage underserved communities. So those communities that are currently underserved by the research that's being conducted. In Dorset, we chose to focus that on people who are homeless and vulnerably housed. Our thinking was that if we could bring together and collaborate with people who had experienced being homeless and vulnerably housed and develop an approach to them being involved in research, so designing with them, what does research mean to you? How do you want to have a voice in research? How can we make that happen? Then we would have an approach and a model that we could then kind of expand and try with other communities and groups. So you'll see there, it became known as the I Am More Than project. The different partner logos are all there in terms of the collaboration of who of us came together. Phase 1 was we basically developed that community-led model of involvement with community researchers who have lived experience of being homeless and vulnerably housed. And we did that through Lantern and through Health Bus with a huge amount of mentoring and support for them of the community researchers. And you'll hear more about kind of what that looks like in practice in a minute. Phase 2, we then got from Clinical Research Network Wessex to try and embed that model further and really pin down, so what is this kind of flexible and inclusive way of working? And we did some engagement with stakeholders. Some of you might have attended one of our 2 stakeholder events. And then we're now in phase 3, which is funding this webinar series and the subsequent workshops and some other work, which is about building wider VCS capacity and capability to engage in research and extend the approach to wider groups at risk of exclusion. So we want to support you to build capacity within your own project organisations to be involved in research, but on your own terms, in ways that will benefit you, in ways that will increase the diversity of who's involved in research, but with a co-production model where we're working in equal partnership for equal benefit. So everybody's contributing and everybody's gaining from that collaboration. So when researchers come to you from the health trust, from the universities, come to you, say, we would really like you to be involved in research, you have that capacity, capability to say yes, and say, and this is how it will work for us, and this is how we would like to be involved. So today is just one of a number of webinars and then workshops and work that we'll be doing to support you to do that, if that's something that you're interested in doing. Paul, I'll hand back to you.
Thanks, Mel. That was excellent, and I think it's really powerful. The idea of being able to build capacity really aligns with this idea of driving meaningful change, and I think everyone on this call today is committed to that. Having said that, it's a great pleasure to introduce you to colleagues at Annabelle Wathen from the Health Buffs and Tanya Bailey from the Lantern Trust, with a conversation facilitated by Kate Jupp from Bournemouth University. I'll hand over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul. First on my list to do is to introduce ourselves, but you've done that beautifully. So we'll go straight in. So in this section, we're going to explore what research is from the perspective of the 2 community organisations that Mel introduced in her last slide that were involved as partners on the WREN project. And we've just heard from Mel how important it is to involve the community organisations at all stages of the project. So what Tanya Bells and I thought might be really helpful would be for us to kind of have a conversation about that, explore what that really meant from the perspective of the community organisations involved. So I've got a series of questions that I'm going to ask to Bells and Tanya in turn, and we can hear what it's been like on the ground. So my first question, I'll come to you, Tanya, first, is what was your first reaction when you were approached to be involved in this research?
Thanks, Kate. Good morning, everyone. My first reaction was probably a bit of a step back, and how do I have the capacity to do this on top of already doing a busy role? So my role at the Lantern is education, training and employment coordinator, but loosely in terms that's activities and involving our clients in opportunities and activities. So I didn't see how, first of all, that was going to like weave in with my role. So it felt a bit overwhelming, if I'm honest. But at the same time, a little bit of reflection, I thought, well, okay. And also actually the input from staff who support me here was actually, well, this is kind of already the approach that we take at the Lantern in working with people having lived experience and using their voices to inform services. So I thought, well, okay, well, that's also the approach I do with my role. So it's actually quite harmonious. So then it become quite an exciting challenge. And I'm always, challenging people to take on opportunities in my role. So that has to be me as well, doesn't it? So, so that was that. And then also I remembered how much I value research, because I think that, it's so important, but across all fields, and working in a place now where I do see that need for systemic change and a bit of a power shift, anything that could offer a way of doing that, which is like an alternative model, which is sort of more grassroots. That felt really important, and it also felt quite pioneering. So I sort of allowed that sense of like, well, here's an opportunity to do research in a way that we're not really defining it. So it was a sort of bit of a seesaw of different emotions, but then just went with the flow.
Yeah, brilliant, Tanya, and really highlighting there the sort of the initial reaction, and then the importance of perhaps of taking time, really taking time to have a think about what could this mean for our community organisation. Fabulous, thank you. Bells, I'm going to check the same question to you. What was your first reaction when you were approached to be involved in the research project?
Morning, everyone. So just a little bit of a brief summary of what I tend to do at the Health Bus. For anyone who doesn't know, the Health Bus is a mobile medical provision for the homeless or those who are vulnerably housed. And I obviously work on the research projects, do something for operations and compliance. And I also have the best part, which is driving the bus around with the outreach nurse and the GP. So that's kind of what I do on a day-to-day basis. I think my first reaction was, research, because it kind of feels off-putting, and I thought, if I feel like that about research, what are our patients going to feel like when I ask them if they'd like to be involved, and the sort of community as a whole? I didn't want people to feel like another piece of data. But I genuinely value research, and I do turn to it for answers for other questions in my life. So I thought, well, this is important, and we need our community voices to be heard, otherwise they may not be. I kind of realised that rocking up with a clipboard and a questionnaire wasn't going to work, and I felt uncomfortable even asking people if they wanted to be involved, and how I was kind of going to do that. I felt like a bit of if I'm honest, I felt like an outsider to the community. So I wasn't sure how to kind of overcome that or break the ice. But in fact, that was my own insecurities about my position and my role and my interpretation as much as anybody else's. So I think it was just getting the confidence to say, look, I'm working on this project. Do you want to help? We value your opinion, rather than going straight in there and saying it's research.
Yeah, brilliant answer there, Bells, and thank you for sharing that. So there was the sort of the real excitement about the potential of it, and then that sort of, but how do I make this happen, because it needs to be done in a different way if it's going to meet the needs of the community. So yeah, fabulous. So now to both of you, and I'll come to you first, Tanya. If you were asked to be involved in a new piece of research, so maybe a different researcher from another university came to you, how do you think you would respond today?
Yeah, thank you. I'd definitely be more confident in what it is in that process. I think I would go the pace. I would slow the pace down a bit. I think I was a little bit eager that there was a finish line to cross, and what that expectation was, when that was me placing that on that, which is probably just a tendency in myself. So yeah, it would be to not to understand what a result means. And I think sometimes in previous maybe roles or expectation that there is this result or something that we're aiming for, I would let that go and realize that what's more important is the people that I'm supporting and working with, that is the pace setting, and I'd find that rhythm a bit quicker, and in trusting that, because I don't think that's terribly normal for the normal approaches aren't like that. So everyone's a bit like, what have we got to do, and just trying to scramble around and thinking, that there's this pressure to do something when actually what we are doing is the process of understanding how research can be more flexible in that way. So I think that's how I would feel, and I would remind myself of why we were entering it in the first place, and that is to really, look at areas that are under researched. And I didn't say before, but my role is funded by the Rough Sleepers Initiative, so we are working with the group of people that was explained about this research looking at homelessness and those that are vulnerably housed, and that's hugely underrepresented in terms of like understanding why that is. I think people kind of know why that is, but more generally, do people understand that in the wider population? Or so yeah, it's that value in remembering what the value of why you're doing something.
Yeah, thank you, Tanya. So there's something there around having confidence to define involvement on your terms that will bring that value to the community that you serve, and the way that would work, particularly around timeframes, perhaps around that, to really value the process of being involved, and not just as a series of tasks. Thank you, Tanya. Bells, the same to you. If you were asked today to be involved in a new research project, how would you react?
Yeah, no, I'm much more positive about it. I'd be like, yeah, bring it on. I think, like Tanya, I realised that I could potentially be trying to over-engineer the output of it, and I needed to kind of take a step back, and it wasn't about me, it was about the community that I work with. I guess my own worries were that, how was firstly, I was aware that people were coming to us and sometimes they weren't very well. So I had to be careful how I timed my approach or my engagement with somebody, because I didn't want to underestimate. I mean, if I'm sitting in a doctor's surgery and somebody comes up to me and starts asking me about research, I'm not in necessarily my best place. So it was a bit of timing. And I was also conscious of my privilege, and my lack of lived experience might get in the way of having conversations that some of our community might judge me on why I even could, what would I know about this? But actually, I think it was more about my confidence has grown, and I feel that actually it was just about starting conversations, getting to understand who people really were. And also, I think having the group of people here, that we've got on the call, BU and the Lantern, and NIHR, it's just supported me when we had wobbles about our approach, or if I felt I wasn't getting much out of it, we all kind of would have a chat, and it was nice. I think having a group of people you can bounce ideas off, who are also in the same position as you, or actually bringing very different ideas, has been really helpful, because whenever I thought I wasn't getting somewhere, I had the reassurance from other people that this still mattered, and even a voice that hasn't been heard yet, matters, and we've got to try and get to everybody.
Lovely there, Belle. So a real sense that there's been a change in your confidence in being involved in research. And actually, you've begun to answer the next question. So I'll come to you first on the next question. And that is recognising that so much has changed from being first invited, or being first involved in the REN project, to if you were asked today afresh to be involved in the study. And I wonder what it is, particularly one or two things perhaps that you can pull out that has really boosted your confidence, led to that different perspective on what research is.
Well, I think you in particular, Kate, kind of reassured me that the compassion will break through my concerns about privilege or not, or a lack of understanding or lived experience. And actually that, I think, is the key, was to, as long as you're kind and you've got the compassion and you genuinely want to get to know and understand people, then you're going to build those relationships. And then even if you're not, you haven't come to someone with the research, you've got a relationship where you can then say to them, do you know anybody who might want to be involved in X? And you also have a pool of people where that you can rely on them to go and seek out other people with other experiences. and you know, sitting with people, sharing ideas and understanding who someone is, what they like, what they stand for, what their dreams are or were, helps you to understand whether they might even be the right person for that particular piece of research. So this for me was about how to even engage people in the first level so that you can build that trust, so you can ask a question later. And I think for me that was the key thing. You know, you can't just rock up and ask someone a question and they don't trust that you've got their best interests at heart, or that they don't trust you as just another human being, then that you've really got that's your place of starting. And I think I am more than just highlighted, you know, the importance of everybody being individuals, not just being another piece of data. None of us are just one thing. You know, nobody's just homeless, and I'm not just a mum. So I think asking those questions about who people are and what they like, for some patients and some people that I spoke to, it was almost the first time they'd been asked about that without it being a means to an end, you know, filling in paperwork or getting to the next stage of help in their process, and actually being asked just because I wanted to get to know someone, at times was quite emotional for me and for the person that I was speaking to. So that made a big difference.
So a real sense there around the support that's available and required to do research for the community organisation, to do it in a way that's meaningful and works for you and for the community and the community researchers. Brilliant, thank you. Tanya, so what was it about this way of working that you found that led to that change, the change in your confidence and the approach?
Yeah, definitely that sense of collaboration between it being like a real team effort, and that sort of support network around it. So doing that in practice, that's the only way you feel that, because it becomes real. And I'm sort of was this like conduit between what it is, this research model, being supported in that, but then, you know, taking it to people who I'm supporting and working alongside, and then understanding how that's going to unravel and what it looks like, and then that just constant ebb and flow of that backwards and forwards, which is really beautiful but can feel stormy at the same time. But that is kind of the beauty of it, because you are working in a way that is allowing this, and it's okay, and that is very reassuring. So yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. And really highlighting the importance of, I think, of the support required for you and the community organisations to enable you to support the community researchers and for them to reach out further, and just how important that support is. Thank you. So my next question is, what have the benefits been for your organisation and the people you support as a result of involvement in the project? So Tanya, I'll come to you first. What's the benefit been to Lantern about being involved in this project?
Yeah, there's probably so many benefits, some that probably will keep happening that we don't even see yet, because of all those lovely experiences and memories that we've created from this project. And I hope that will, you know, keep coming, and people will notice that in the future. I think just doing something that was already aligned with how the Lantern works, and has always listened to the voice of lived experience to influence and inform services, because that's what it's been built on, and, you know, has been since it started in 1984. So to just keep to build on that is a benefit, because it's like this lovely reflection of what, you know, the Lantern already does, but is saying that, you know, here's research that's going to really acknowledge that. I think that's a benefit in the wider sense of how you change things, but also just, you know, giving people opportunities to do the community research, use the skills that they bring to it, as well as their lived experience, and that everything that someone could bring something, everyone had something to contribute. There wasn't there wasn't a job description, so it moved around them, and that's quite unique. So that, I think that's a huge benefit in a way of working that is, alternative, but it is necessary, and so, can seem quite sort of alternative, but actually, that's the way forwards that we would want to seep out into all areas in society. So and also just valuing people's thoughts, and what they bring and their experiences.
Yeah, Tanya, I love that sense of valuing each and everybody's unique expertise that they brought to the project. Lovely, thank you. Belle, same question to you. What benefits has the health bus seen about being involved in research?
So I guess I still struggle with calling it research, because I can't think, like everything in the project, it's been more than research. Yeah. But I think the people that I've worked with, we've got stronger relationships, not with just me, but with our whole team and within the community. We were doing these little canvases, the sort of mobile canvases, where I just said, can you tell me more about you? Start with an I am, and then just put things down. And we had one day at the drop-in, while people were waiting for appointments and stuff, where there were about 10 people sitting around a table. Some were writing on others' behalves because of, literacy issues and things, which was quite something. Others were taking the mickey out of, what they were writing, who they were. But it also brought out stories and memories within them, which I think they would have otherwise perhaps not shared with each other. They weren't going to sit down and necessarily chat to each other. So it was much more than just sitting and asking a few questions. And I think giving the people a voice and knowing they're valued for their opinion, whatever format that comes in, whether it is a little canvas or it's a song or a poem or something, just to, all of that is just shaping research in a slightly different way.
Yeah, and really powerful, and a great example of sharing how research can feel. And that was beautifully put. So thank you, Bells. So my final next penultimate question. It surely couldn't have all been plain sailing. So you've really kind of, you've said what benefits has been. Can you give me a couple of challenges that you've faced and how you've overcome them? Tanya, 2 challenges and how you've resolved them. Or maybe you haven't.
Probably not. I think, okay, the first one is like an internal challenge.
Yep.
To, my expectation, to challenge that, that's what I'm placing on it, and to fight against that. So if that makes sense, so that there is no goal, if you like, and that was for me, that was and I have to keep doing that, because that's just how I work sometimes. And also to just not worry if it felt like we wasn't getting anywhere, which is sort of linked, I suppose, to that. But in a way, that's kind of what I do in my role, is consistency. If you're going to put on an event, or you have a session, you do it whatever, because it's kind of like making that cause, and the challenge is to not give up. The response to the challenge is to not give up.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
And not on myself. Yeah.
Belle, same question to you. Couple of challenges and how you've overcome them.
So just the terminology, realizing that some people face literacy issues, want to be heard, but they can't read or write. So how do we still hear their voice? Building trust. Realizing that it's, as Tanya said, there doesn't have to be an end. It can be, sort of an atelic event, I think is the phrase. And also just being yourself and allowing other people to just be them as well, sitting with people and being alongside them, not at them. So, that kind of idea of sharing the sandwich with somebody rather than buying them a sandwich, because that means so much more, and you're going to find out so much more about somebody by doing that.
Beautifully put. And so the final question, if a member of the audience today on the webinar was approached by a university, a researcher, to be involved in research, what single piece of gold advice would you give to them? So just one piece of advice. Tanya, to you first.
I would say if it feels uncomfortable, then take comfort in that, because it's probably the right thing to do.
Bells.
Probably just, yeah, don't over-engineer the responses. Find out more about people and expect to be sort of surprised, moved and humbled, really. Thank
you both for sharing such great insights. And I think we've really heard what research can be for community organisations and the people they serve. So thank you both very much. Paul, back to you.
Thank you.
Well, firstly, Kate, thank you for facilitating that. I just want to say wonderful reflections, and apologies, but I'm just looking at a note because I scratched something down when you were talking. What it struck me was that there's, anxiety about doing things in a different way can often be a barrier to delivery. And but it was wonderful to hear how it was overcome through compassion, and that was hugely powerful. And I can imagine a great sort of energizer again for everyone on the call. I'm a horrible timekeeper, so apologies to you all. With what I've just said, Chris, I wonder if you would mind ending the recording at this point, and then we can open up the session